Christopher Columbus was a renowned seafaring explorer who sailed under the banner of Spain while exploring the Americas. He'd allowed Europeans to begin their exploration, plunder, and colonization of these regions. And although some believe that he was the first to discover America, giving him the title of discoverer of the New World, this is not entirely accurate. Leaders of various European countries funded journeys overseas during the 15th and 16th centuries, with the anticipation that explorers would come upon large uncharted territories and enormous amounts of financial resources. The Age of Discovery, also called the Age of Exploration, was given rise to by the Portuguese. Starting around 1420, tiny Portuguese ships called caravels sped along the African coast, transporting captives from Asia and Africa to Europe along with products like spices, gold, and other commodities. It is thought that Christopher Columbus was born in Genoa, Italy, around the year 1451. He secured employment aboard a commercial ship when he was a teenager and continued to sail until pirates ambushed his boat in 1476 as it traveled north along the Portuguese coast. The ship collapsed and sank, but the young Columbus reached the shore on a piece of wood and traveled to Lisbon, where he later learned mathematics, astronomy, mapping, and navigation. Christopher also started to formulate the idea that would alter the course of history. By the end of the 15th century, land travel from Europe to Asia was essentially impossible. It was difficult to avoid coming into contact with hostile soldiers due to the route's length and arduousness. Portuguese explorers took to the sea to find a solution, sailing south along the coast of West Africa and around the Cape of Good Hope. Columbus, however, had a different notion. Rather than circumnavigating the enormous African continent, why not sail west over the Atlantic? Although the young navigator's arithmetic was flawed, his rationale was correct. He incorrectly asserted that the Earth's radius was substantially smaller than the estimates. As a result, he felt that traveling by boat from Europe to Asia via the Northwest Passage should be feasible and relatively simple. He proposed his idea to representatives in Portugal and England, but it wasn't until the Spanish kings, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, that he found a receptive listener. Columbus yearned for fame and fortune, while Ferdinand and Isabella shared this ambition and saw it as an opportunity to propagate Catholicism over the globe. On August 3, 1492, Columbus' illustrious ships, the Nina Pinta and Santa Maria, sailed out of port. Although getting to Cathay was his primary goal, it was clear that he was to claim any regions not already ruled by a sovereign state for Spain and to uphold the Catholic Church. He received two formal documents to support this. A contract between him and the throne stipulated that Columbus would be given the status of ruler or governor of whatever lands he seized for the throne, and a promise to provide the monarchy with 90% of the venture's revenues in exchange for investment. In a letter of introduction, Ferdinand and Isabella asked any king or queen Columbus interacted with to provide him with a passageway and provisions, because his mission was to advance Christianity. During his first voyage, Columbus landed on a Caribbean island on October 12, 1492, and was met by natives. He rowed ashore with the Nina and Pinta captains, the fleet secretary, and the royal surveyor. Columbus knew he hadn't landed in Cathay, but he thought he'd found an unclaimed island near his goal, so he declared it for Spain. The natives called the island Guanahani, but he called it San Salvador. Soon the 5 Europeans and native islanders swapped gifts of friendship. After meeting the locals, he traveled to Asia, exploring different islands and building the community of La Navidad in Haiti with the local chieftain's permission. He returned to Spain carrying abducted natives, where news of his discovery spread swiftly. Columbus was again sent back to the New World in 1493 to secure other vast lands, future followers of Christ, and incredible wealth. Columbus returned to the Americas in September 1493, about 6 months later. Along with some of his ship's crew and hundreds of natives who had been taken into slavery, he discovered the Hispaniola town to be completely wrecked and put his brothers Bartolomeo and Diego Columbus in charge of rebuilding it. He then continued his futile quest for gold and other items by moving west. Accompanying him were a sizable number of native people who Europeans had enslaved. He sent about 500 enslaved people to Queen Isabella instead of the monetary wealth he had promised the Spanish kings. The queen was appalled and swiftly returned the explorer's gift, because she thought that any people Columbus found were Spanish subjects who could not be sold into slavery. Columbus made his third trip westward across the Atlantic in May 1498. Before returning to the tragic Hispaniola colony, where the colonists had mounted a brutal uprising against the Columbus brothers' violence and incompetence, he traveled to Trinidad and the South American mainland. The situation was so terrible that the Spanish government sent a new governor to take control. The native Taino population, who was compelled to work on plantations and look for gold, was wiped out at the same time. Within 60 years of Columbus' arrival, just a small number of the possibly 250,000 Taino remained on their island. After being detained, Christopher Columbus was taken back to Spain in chains. The elderly Columbus convinced the Spanish government to fund one last voyage across the Atlantic in 1502, even though he had been acquitted of the most severe charges and stripped of his noble titles. This time, Columbus reached Panama, a few miles from the Pacific Ocean, but had to leave 2 of his 4 ships due to storm damage and unfriendly inhabitants. The explorer left empty-handed and headed back to Spain. Eventually, in May 1506, he passed away in Valladolid due to health issues. Some claim that Columbus discovered America, yet Native American tribes had been present in the Americas for hundreds of years before Columbus or the Vikings arrived. Viking explorers like Leif Erikson had explored North America decades before. Columbus' explorations of the Americas just paved the path for European nations to conquer and oppress the people there. However, one of the advantages was that Europe and the Americas immediately developed trade relations. Tobacco, potatoes, tomatoes, and other Native American plants were sent to Europe. Columbus' reputation remains contentious today, although he is recognized as a courageous and groundbreaking explorer who changed the New World. His deeds also set in motion the developments that ultimately ruined the local communities he and his fellow explorers met. This brings us to the end of this video. If you like the video, please consider subscribing and sharing so we can keep bringing more content like this. Also, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.